days a week work. We're going to talk to Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman, in a moment about this, but I've got an extraordinary document that's been sent to me by a doctor that I know, and it's about a referral that was made by the doctor for a patient who is suffering from what it says here is urgent inflammatory bowel disease. It says in terms of the priority, it is urgent, but the clinic has just cancelled the appointment, and the reason given is, it says here, doctors on strike, no answer, text sent. So whoever's suffering from that particular problem is going to have to wait and get it rearranged because of the strike. Marvellous, isn't it? Roy, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
We've set the cat amongst the pigeons here this morning, Roy, and frightened the horses slightly. We spoke to Dr. Dean Eggett, who's a decent guy. I'm not having a go at him personally, but he was explaining to me how he and many other doctors in GP surgeries, which are going to be somehow radicalised by Keir Starmer. He says he's going to stop the 8 a.m. rush for appointments. He said on the one hand they haven't got enough appointments that they can see people for, but he also said he only does 3 days a week in a GP surgery. Extraordinary.
It is. I mean, I don't know. He might be a training practice. He might be teaching on other days.
No, he says he's working on NHS pathway planning because he's got a unique insight into the NHS. I suggested his unique insight would be better used being a GP.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the GPs do have these other jobs. I mean, I agree. I go back to the days of what I call family practice.
Yes.
You know, you knew who your GP was. I mean, you know, the anecdotal story is always very boring for people, but when I was a little lad, my life was actually saved by a GP.
Right.
Because he was the family GP. He knew me and my family. He knew immediately what was wrong with me, and he took me and my dad to A&E in his car.
Right.
Now, can you imagine that happening these days?
No.
So, no, I mean, the whole business of what you and I would call family practice has been industrialised now. It's very hard to get a relationship with a GP. You never really know who you're going to see. And look, the other side of that story is that GPs are seeing 1 million people a day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible increase in their workload. Now, a lot of people are being seen, you know, on the mobile phone, which suits a lot of people. I mean, it suits me mostly. You know, if I need to talk to a GP, I don't want to sit in a waiting room. I'll get them on the blower, and you know, so that works quite well. A lot of them have this kind of FaceTime thing that you can use.
Right.
And you know, it would be wrong to think that, you know, GPs are sitting on their backsides not doing anything. The sheer number of appointments they're doing in the aggregate is absolutely...
No, I get that. But just imagine, I mean, when I used to work in the newspaper business, we used to have, you know, circulation wars. You know, the circulations aren't what they were. But we used to have a rule. If you could get somebody to buy your newspaper 3 days a week, your circulation would absolutely rocket. If they could buy it 1 day a week, it was OK, but get them to buy it 3 days a week. And that's why they would always do promotions into through the week, you know. So imagine the numbers of people that could be seen if doctors who are working 3 days a week would even just work 4. Yes. That would be a massive increase in appointments, wouldn't it?
It would be, but I mean, going back to this GP, whatever he's doing about pathway planning, I mean, that is quite important. That means, you know, people present with a particular condition, and the pathway that they take through the system is often pretty clunky.
Yes.
And that's
But surely that should be something that the NHS, with all these millions of employees, could find somebody else to do, surely. I mean, if you're employed as a doctor, it's like if you're employed as the driver of a pilot of a plane, there's not much point in you being a stewardess, is there?
No, but I do think I'm defending the NHS here, because I do think
it's a tricky one, that.
I know, but I do think, I mean, having done this kind of stuff myself, there is no one better than a GP or a doctor actually to do pathway planning. So, I mean, let's just park that for a moment. But to take up your point about GPs working part-time, it is true that I think it was about 3 years ago, we tipped the balance. There were more female GPs than there are male GPs. Now, women generally in the workplace, as a generality, have the majority of responsibility for caring for families and relatives and things like that. And we find a lot of female GPs do work part-time because it fits in with their family life. And we are finding, I mean, if you have two female GPs working part-time covering the day, effectively you've got two GPs to cover the work of one that will be working full-time. So the argument then is, well, do you say you can only work full-time in the NHS? And if you do that, you'll lose people. So you just have to kind of put up with the way it is. But there's no question about it.
But that's the trouble with the NHS, is that's what we get. That's the message that comes down from on high. You just have to put up with it the way it is. And if you don't like it, shove off.
Well, I mean, it's the other way round, isn't it? Where the NHS is saying, look, if you're going to do part-time, we'll accept the fact that it's part-time.
No, I'm talking about, this is what they say to patients. This is, this is people's experience of going to see doctors is basically that take it or leave it. We can see you a week on Thursday. We've had people ringing in today saying, I've been given an appointment to see the GP in 2025. I mean, the system is failing. It's not working.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there's no question about it. This whole appointment thing is difficult. Actually, I think, I'm just calling to mind the figure, I think well over 70% of people wanting an appointment with a GP are seen on the same or the next day. There are people that do get deferred. Some get deferred for a very good reason. Some perhaps are watch and wait. Perhaps some are waiting for a test or test results, diagnostic to come back. I mean, it is complicated, but the broad picture is that perception is everything. The perception is it's difficult to get an appointment with a GP, and you do wait. The numbers actually undermine that perception, but as we know, Mike, perception is everything.
It really is. And talking of which, the doctors are going on strike again. Junior doctors' strike starts tomorrow. Already cancelling operations, already cancelling procedures. I mean, they've already said as well, the BMA, they don't care if Labour get in. They're still going to go on strike if they don't get what they want.
Exactly. I mean, I'll be honest, I sort of supported the doctors when all this started. Because if you look at the numbers, it is true that the value of their wage packet has been eroded by inflation because they haven't had increments, to keep up with inflation.
Well, they have had increments, they really have.
But they haven't had increments to keep up with inflation. Now, there's two arguments about that. Let's look at them. The first is, well, where the hell were the BMA? They're the trade union. Yeah. They're supposed to be representing doctors. Were they sitting on their backside? Were they asleep at the wheel? How did he get like this? And the second thing is, were they exploited by successive governments over the last 10 or 15 years? And the answer to that is probably true, because it's the same with the nurses. The nurses had the same argument. Now,
a lot of the people that you see talking on picket lines weren't even doctors 10 or 15 years ago. These are people who are new doctors. There was a couple of people I remember seeing last summer who were on strike who hadn't actually even started being doctors yet. They literally just qualified, and the first thing they did was go on strike. So they must have known going into the job, this is what you're getting paid. Why are you going into a job that you think you're going to be underpaid for?
You're right. But we are where we are, so what do we do now?
Yeah.
So if you were the BMA, what would be the strategic advantage of going out on strike in the middle of an election where the outcome of the election is all but a slam dunk? There's going to be a Labour win. What is the point of striking? And with all the purdah arrangements and all the difficulty there would be to continue these discussions with the government now. I mean, they could do it if they wanted to, but what is the point? And as a kind of a side issue here, if you look at what worries the public, they're worried about the cost of living and the performance of the NHS, right? That's the two big things. Where has Victoria Atkins been, the Secretary of State for Health, during the whole of this interminable election campaign? She's had 4 or 5 weeks now here on the telly. Where is she? Why has she not been on programmes like this? I tell you why, because she's scared. And I tell you, in the NHS, they call her the sugar plum fairy. I mean, she's really, she's just totally hopeless. Yeah. So she's in hiding. She did a press conference yesterday about trans and issues like that. There were 15 journalists, only 15 at the press conference, and not one of them was a health specialist. Right. So she's in hiding. So let's go back to the strike. There is no point in striking during the election campaign. All this does is damage the health prospects of the public that the doctors are supposed to care a lot about, and that's their job. I think that this really says a lot about a generation of doctors that are coming through. Now, if we look at it from the Labour Party point of view, if Keir Starmer had some bottle and if he wanted to look like a Prime Minister, he would have got hold of the leaders of this strike, taken them in for a drink into the House of Commons and said, right, let's have a deal on this. I'll give you an undertaking to settle this over the life of the next Parliament. You stop your strike, we'll claim a victory, you'll have your pay rise. Why hasn't he done that?
Well, because he hasn't costed it, presumably.
Well, I mean, look, it's going to cost whatever it costs, isn't it? We can't carry on like this forever. No. They want 35%. They're not going to get that. But you could organise some pay parity uplift in stages. And if you did it over the life of a parliament, we could give it a soft landing and it would probably work. So the Tories are running away from it. Labour are running away from it. The junior doctors' leadership really haven't got a clue what they're trying to achieve anymore, other than damage the public. Because I can tell you, these strikes, having spoken to people who run hospitals, do enormous damage. Of course. I don't care what they say, because in the run-up to the strike days, you have to clear everybody out of the hospital because you don't want sick people in hospital during a strike. You can't do admissions or elective procedures during a strike. And afterwards, you've got all the congestion that you caused in the run-up.
By having the strike. Absolutely right. Listen, Roy, we've got to run. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman. We've got to